Avengers Endgame was the culmination of almost 11 years of cinematic history, so it should be no surprise that the film has a ton of little details with stories behind them that you may not have caught on the first time you watched it. From Easter eggs to comic book references to fun facts, here's our list of the top 10 secrets you missed in Avengers Endgame. And keep in mind, friend, this video has a ton of spoilers for the entire film, so be warned. If you guys want a spoiler-free review of the movie, head on over to our channel and check it out. But also, probably avoid the comments of all of our other Avengers Endgame videos, because y'all gonna get spoiled. And at number 10, the Roscoe name tag. When Cap and Iron Man travel back to the 70s, they both get themselves some new year-appropriate threads in order to blend in. While Stark takes on a businessman persona, Steve is dressed in a military uniform. What's interesting though is that the name tag on Steve's uniform reads Roscoe. This is a little reference to Roscoe Simons, who assumed the role of Captain America after Steve Rogers became Nomad. And funny enough, Roscoe took over for Cap around the same time that this scene occurs. I mean, different universes being the 616 and then the MCU, but it happened in 616 in 1975 after Cap became Nomad in Captain America Volume 1 Issue 180. Roscoe would later be killed off by Red Skull when the villain discovered that the Cap he was fighting wasn't actually Steve Rogers, but Roscoe Simons instead. Roscoe was crucified and tortured by Red Skull to send a message to anyone who tried to take him on that was a fake Captain America, and that they would suffer a similar fate. All that from a name tag, eh? Up next, number 9, Mr. Jarvis. This is something that many of you may have missed if you didn't watch the Agent Carter MCU television series. Edwin Jarvis is one of the reoccurring characters in the show, and actively aids Peggy Carter throughout the series, along with being Howard Stark's butler and trusted ally. The character makes a return in Avengers Endgame, only for the briefest of moments when Tony and Steve are in the 70s, and Tony encounters his father, Howard Stark. Jarvis is played by the same actor as in Agent Carter, James Darcy. Years later, Tony Stark would name his AI system Jarvis after him, as well as use a similar voice to his. And at number 8, community cameos. Before the Russo brothers directed Captain America Winter Soldier and all of the MCU films that followed, they directed a handful of episodes of Community, you know, the popular sitcom that aired from 2009 to 2015 starring Joel McHale. Over the years, because of this connection, we've seen a bunch of actors from Community appear in MCU movies, and Endgame is no different. Two of the cast members, Yvette Nicole Brown and Ken Jeong, make appearances. The first is Ken Jeong, who plays a security guard at the lot where Scott Lang's van had been impounded. When Scott returns from the quantum realm purely by accident, Ken sees him on a security camera and lets him out. Yvette Nicole Brown appears later on in the movie as a worker at Camp Lehigh in the 70s who calls security on Captain America and Tony Stark when she takes an uncomfortable elevator ride with the two. And at number 7, Rocket's threads. Let's move on to talking about some of the references that the film pulled from the comics, starting with Rocket's new threads in Endgame. In the film, there's a time jump to 5 years later, and Rocket is seen donning some new apparel. It's a blue costume with red highlights and a bandana around his neck. Now those are actually details pulled from the Guardians of the Galaxy comic volume that ran from 2008 to 2010, but the bandana is an addition of its own. And at number 6, Smart Hulk. Speaking of comic book references, one of the biggest to appear on the screen was Smart Hulk. You know, the version of Bruce Banner and the Hulk that have melded into one thanks to the magic of cooperation. Sort of. Well, this was no secret. Many fans knew that we'd be getting this Banner-fied Hulk thanks to concept art leaks long ago, but might be a surprise to some who aren't familiar with the comics is that Smart Hulk comes from writer Peter David's run on Incredible Hulk. David was the first writer to have merged Bruce and his big green other half into one single persona. There's even a few moments that resonate from that arc in the film, like Banner being friendly to small children. In the film, a group of kids approach him and he takes a photograph with them. Moving on to number 5, Secret Wars Issue 4. One of the most impactful moments in Endgame was when 2014 Thanos arrived to the present day and literally blew up the Avengers compound, right after the team had successfully reversed the Mad Titan snap from Infinity War. Moments later, we see the Avengers scattered throughout the debris, and the Hulk is left holding up a massive mountain of debris on his back, while War Machine struggles to free Rocket and not get flooded. This moment feels like an homage to an incredibly iconic comic book cover from the first Secret Wars story arc, Secret Wars Issue 4, where the majority of the cover is filled by a massive rock structure that the Hulk holds up on his shoulders, while the other members of the Avengers lie beneath him. The caption on the cover reads, "Beneath 150 billion tons stands the Hulk," and he's not happy. Moving on to number 4, Hail Hydra. Perhaps one of the greatest moments in the film is after Tony, Steve, Scott, and Bruce travel back to 2012 during the Battle Battle of New York to acquire multiple Infinity Stones. Cap finds himself inside of an elevator that mirrors the elevator scene in Captain America Winter Soldier. Knowing that all of these individuals in the elevator with him are Hydra members, Cap, rather than fighting them, decides to do something else super sneaky. He whispers into Jasper's ear, "Hail Hydra." While that's hilarious on its own, fans of the Marvel Comics may have picked this up as a reference to the highly controversial Captain America Steve Rogers comic from 2017 that led into Secret Empire, in which Captain America is revealed to have been an undercover agent working for Hydra all along. While the story resolved that and everything went back to normal, sort of, at the time there was major backlash that Cap, being the patriotic hero he was and a symbol of America, could ever be a Nazi of sorts. Many critics felt as if the Hail Hydra line in the film was an attempt to make light of one of Marvel Comics' most controversial storylines. Moving on to number 3, the clanking. While there are no end credit scenes to be found in Avengers Endgame, there is a little surprise for fans that occurs right at the end of the credits when the Marvel title card appears. Now if you listen closely, you'll hear the sound of metal clanking. That is the same sound effect from the 2008 Iron Man film, in which Tony Stark is working on his initial Iron Man Mach 1 suit inside of that cave while being held hostage. It's a nice little throwback. And while it has spawned some fan theories, especially considering the film plays so much with time travel and the fabric of time, others found it to be a nice little Easter egg. And for those of you who are disappointed that there was no end credit scenes, just let the movie breathe, guys. We've had almost 9 years of end credit scenes leading up to this moment. Just relish in it a bit. I'm sure we'll get some again when Spider-Man Far From Home comes out this summer, so fear not, friends. And at number 2, Jim Starlin. Fans may have noticed a fun little Easter egg in one of the earlier scenes of the film, during the support group therapy session that Steve Rogers was running. The man who speaks about his grief is none other than one of the co-directors of the movie, Joe Russo. But perhaps the more interesting thing about that scene is one of the other members of the support group who doesn't have any lines. It's Jim Starlin. For those of you unfamiliar with the comics, Jim Starlin is the man who created Thanos for Marvel, and is responsible for the Infinity Gauntlet comics, aka the story arc in which Infinity War was based off of. While major aspects and plot points were left unused or changed altogether, a bunch of pieces of the comics were adapted, including some pretty potent frames from Infinity Gauntlet that made it into the Infinity War film. And finally, and at number 1, X-Men. Last but not least, let's talk about a major Easter egg that gave us a tiny taste of what's to come in the future of the MCU. When Scott Lang returns from the quantum realm, he's shocked by the barren world that he sees. He eventually stumbles upon a memorial for the Vanished, and begins to put 2 and 2 together. In a panic, he begins to search the memorial for the name of his daughter, Cassie Lang. Luckily, he doesn't find it, but instead spots his own name up there, with people having thought he was dusted due to his disappearance. Now aside from Scott's name, there are a few other names that fans of the comics, specifically fans of the X-Men, may have spotted. We're talking about Roberto da Costa. Roberto is a character who joins the New Mutants who first appeared in Marvel graphic novel issue 4 back in 1982, created by Chris Claremont and Bob McLeod. His powers include solar radiation absorption and rechanneling, which gives him abilities like super strength, flight, thermokinesis, self-sustenance, and fire and heat immunity. Oh, what does this mean? Well, it could be that Marvel Studios is establishing that some of the mutant characters currently exist in the MCU. There's a theory that the return from the snap may have triggered the dormant mutant powers of certain individuals, or that the Infinity Stones gave them mutations upon being brought back, especially considering how much the Hulk struggled with the gauntlet when wearing it. Just the fact that they exist is something to get really excited over, even if it was just a cheeky little Easter egg with no grander purpose. So it could potentially be a red herring of a reference. Alright, there we have it, friends. What other little hidden secrets did you notice when you watched Avengers Endgame? Let us know in those comments below. If you dug this video, spread the love, hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for more MCU and Avengers Endgame content, including Easter eggs you missed, the Endgame ending explained, and much more. In the meantime though, thanks for watching, friends. I'll catch you all in the next video.